Hey all, welcome to the Power Hour. Fire up. Am I late? I think I'm late. Well, quite about on time. Fire up chat here. Make sure everyone can hear me. So, all good? Can you guys hear me? Florida Vapes, hello. Justin, thank you for joining us. Michael, Yin Vape is 804. Tech Guy Brian, Brent Chadwick. Justin, thank you. Dada Vape, thank you very much. Okay. I hope everyone had a decent weekend, and maybe there's still more to come. Scott Bogfoot, welcome. Fog Dog. Rick Crawford, Christopher Murdoch. ACC 1079, good evening. Did some digging into some of the old mods today, and well, part of a spring cleaning being done a little bit late, and found some interesting stuff. Cholo Ranch, hello. Dallas Vapor, hello. Yeah, Dallas, it's an interesting topic. It can get real technical real quick, so I'm gonna have to be careful tonight. It's just a little talking about it, just to see if it's worthwhile. There's enough interest maybe to do a video of it. Chris Robertson, thanks for joining us. What the front? Hello. Forrest, howdy. Yeah, this time I actually remembered to take down the board with all the stuff no one's supposed to see yet. Loki, hello, welcome. Matthew McDonald, hello there. Okay, well, today's stuff. It was, well, actually, it's going to be a mech day because I had 2 out of 3 test rigs going. And so there's no vaping until later tonight after dinner when everything's done, which will be good because I've got some finance paperwork to do. So I'll be good and stressed from that. Got the culverin on a brass Admiral, excuse me, aluminum Admiral. And this one wasn't a giveaway to my patrons. Actually, I don't do giveaways, but they just pay for shipping and it's theirs. Um, but I partially stripped the threads, so this one became a reference mod for me. And then the Iconic on a stainless steel Dreamer, and I like the wasted designs, not WASTED, WAISTED, but where it cuts in a little bit at the waist. Well, I kind of like those. Um, it's just a real good place to put the thumb, and just doing the typical. My closest thing to an all-day vape, the 70 VG with a touch of mint because the weather has just been hot. And a little bit of breaks in the evening, but we're running what, 85, 88, occasional jump up to 90, and lots of humidity, occasional big storm that we had here, what, yesterday? Yesterday and the day before, overnight. And it's just and I don't want to run the air conditioner all the time. It's a lot of noise, it's a lot of money. So you just end up being hot all the time. But I hope everyone else is doing well and staying cool. Red Claw, welcome from Germany. Fog Dog, only 103. Okay, as long as it's nice and cool where you are, that's good. Total Rand's 104. See, I'm dying at around 75. Well, it's all about the humidity because Vegas, hot as Hades. But if it's dry, as long as you're not blasting in the sun, it's not nearly as bad, at least for me. You know, 80 degrees, 85 degrees and humid, I'm dying. 105 and dry. If I'm not in the sun, I'm okay. Iowa sounds a lot like New York City. Chris Robertson. Stuart Adrian, thanks for joining us. Excuse me. Dart Frog Paul, welcome. I found a interesting when I was digging, and I found my first, I'll call it official mod. Something, yeah, it wasn't. That's unfair because I used a Vision spinner with CE4 starting off. Hated it. Then I had 2 friends. Well, one friend with 2 mods, but 2 of them together were kind of looking around for mods for me, and they had some janky homemade pieces of junk box mods. And I quickly got rid of those. And this was the first one that I really bought. I felt like was, quote, a real mod, quote unquote. And it was the Tesla 2 LiPo. And so dug this one up. I haven't even, you know, tried to fire it up or try to charge it. I think I'm going to have to open it up. I just want to take a look at the battery in here after, I think it's 5 years. And so use this for a while just to kind of look around at addies and play around with coils. I had a iGo W single coil that I was using twisted 28 Canthal coils on, had half ohm, and bang away with this thing. So it's kind of neat to find this, but I'll have to take a peek inside this little trip down the memory lane for me. Chris Robertson, Vincent Spinner with a CE4 was first non-disposable. Okay, never tried the disposables. This was 2015. Did we have them? I don't think there were any kind of disposables. You could throw away anything you wanted. Uh, Dallas Vapor, I hope so. Well, the thing is, after not using it for 4 years, the battery could have self-discharged down to a level where I'm not going to try to charge it anymore. Um, but I've always liked the look. I just like this kind of gray finish. I call it a battleship gray, um, semi-matte. Actually, what would they call it? Semi-gloss finish. And luckily, it's got nice big Phillips screws. And it'll be easy to take apart, take a look at it, and measure the voltages on there. But we are here actually to talk a little bit about, let me get some other stuff out of the way. I don't know if any of you had seen um, either their ads, their teasers, or Richard Vick's review, Jay Hayes' review, or a couple others out there for the Freemax Maxis, Freemax Maxis 100 watt and 200 watt devices. The 100 watt device, I believe, is a single 18650, 2700, 21700, and the Maxis 200 is dual 18650 only, I believe. Though it's interesting, if you go to the Freemax site and you on the tablet, if I go to portrait mode, the battery type tells me 18650, 2700, 21700. But if I go to landscape mode, it tells me 18650 only. So I think it's 18650 only. I forgot, I'd asked somebody about that, and they said one of my patrons, somebody helped me out with that. Um, so the thing that intrigued me, the tank is getting a lot of people's attention because it's more just great tank. What do they have? A dual mesh coils now or something. I hadn't looked too closely into it because when I get the unit, I'll play with the tank then. Right now, I really don't care what the tank goes. But what intrigued me was their smart load, quote unquote, technology where the battery can go in either way, essentially non-polarized battery slots. And for something like a single battery mod, okay, that's cool. That's good. It's overdue. But for a dual battery mod where either battery can go in either way, that's great. And I think that's really handy. It's especially great for someone who, has lousy eyesight, like for me. I'm farsighted. So just, if I don't have the glasses on, just trying to, if I forget which way the batteries might go in a device, or I just want to confirm it and just trying to catch that exact angle in order to find the polarity sign. Am I getting, I am changing the brightness as my hand goes around. I'm seeing in the Venetian blinds, I can flicker. Sorry about that. One of these days, I'll be able to use something other than the iPhone. I'll be able to forward a camera and put it into the laptop. But I digress. So the smart load technology really intrigued me. I went on to talk a little bit about it. Now, Jay Hayes loved it. Innovative as hell. He really loved it. And what's interesting is it's fairly simple technology. It just takes a decent amount of room on the circuit board. You need a lot of components, and I want to show you just a couple pictures. For those of you who are not familiar with the device, that is the device. Is that right side up? Yes, it is. Um, and as I go to a battery, I jumped too far. This high technology stuff. But what's interesting is, look at the freaking circuit board. you need to support that kind of thing. That's the Maxis 200 circuit board, courtesy of Vaping MacGyver. It's kind enough to let me use this photograph. But there are 14 big honking MOSFETs inside that unit that are needed to be able to essentially do this to one or both batteries and then combine or not combine their outputs. So that it's a lot. It's the technology is simple, but you need a lot of room on the circuit board. Oh, and guess what I forgot to do? We'll get 4 rings. And I had gotten pretty good at that, at turning off the phone. But then today, zooming around, sat down seconds before we were supposed to start, and kabang. My apologies. Um, I I need a checklist like taped right over there that I could do things with. Luckily, I don't have the volume turned up because who knows what kind of stuff that you would hear. Now, I know that some of you who do techie stuff and electronic stuff like that will say to use diodes, and you could use diodes to. That's the electronic component that steers current, allows current to go in one direction, and you use them in a certain configuration, and you can steer no matter what way the battery's in. You can steer the current in the right direction. But those diodes generate tons of heat and have huge voltage drops. So they use MOSFETs, which are in a lot of devices, and we see that they're used for protection. They're electronic switches, essentially. They're transistors that are used as electronic switches, and they're used to steer the current around. But you can still get some voltage drop through it. So I'm curious as what the power loss is through the MOSFETs. Namely, if you've got a device that maybe has a 3.2 volt cutoff, you can bring the batteries down to 3.2 volts, then it goes whoa, 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 either stops, refuses to fire, or throttles back the power. Well, if you've got all these extra MOSFETs in, each one with a voltage drop, and you have to go through 2, 3, 4 of them or something like that in order to be able to do this to the batteries, depending how you put them in, does that effectively raise your cutoff to 3.3, 3.4 volts or something? I ran a couple of numbers and it looked like each MOSFET it has to go through that could be 0.05 volt drop, so 2 extra MOSFETs would be zero point 0.1 volts. So your 3.2 volt device turns into a 3.3 volt cutoff one. So some of what we have to deal with or give up um, in order to have this non-polarity might involve that, a little bit of voltage drop. Also, a little bit of heat. There's like one and a third watts, if you're using them hard, you're running like 30 amps out to your coils, then uh, you might have 3, 4, 5 watts of power, but I mean that's a big honking circuit board, and it looked like there's some good heat spreading on here. So I think unless you're going crazy with high power level, which is a problem with any device with overheating, uh, having this smart load technology where the batteries can go in either way, which I can't wait to try out. That's going to be so weird not to have to look. But I'm hoping that it's done well. I'm hoping that's something that other manufacturers do. It costs money, it takes up room. Uh, to do well, it costs these amount of money. You can do it really badly and generate tons of heat and have huge voltage drops just by using cheaper MOSFETs. But that's a disaster, and that's not going to accomplish anything for anybody. I'm just going to fire up chat here because I don't want to be able to, I don't want to ignore that. And something that came up in Jay's video that I wanted to touch on also was the series versus parallel. And was it putting it in series? Was it putting it in parallel? And I think, no matter how you're putting the batteries in, if 2 batteries go in, they are in series. It's just runs more efficiently to have that higher voltage. It's just easier to make the power you want if you've got 8.4 volts available, as opposed to lots of 4.2 volts available. It's just the way the electronics work, and a little less expensive to have components for a series device also. But then, in terms of putting your batteries in, I started thinking, a lot of people were worried, does it put it in series? Does it put it in parallel? And I just wanted to mention again that for a regulated device, not with the smart load technology, but all other regulated devices, it doesn't matter if the batteries are in series or in parallel. The amount of current from the battery, each battery is exactly the same. When you've got 2 batteries in parallel, okay, each one, you have to supply lots of current because the voltage is low. because your power is your voltage times your current. So if you got lower voltage, you have to pull out lots of current, but you have two batteries, so they share the current. If I have two batteries in series, I've got lots of voltage to make the power, so I don't have to draw as much current. So even though each battery supplies the full current, I don't need nearly as much current. In fact, I only need half the current. So the batteries, two batteries in series, each battery supplies the same amount of current as each battery does with two batteries in parallel. Now that's a standard regulated device. For the smart load technology thing, I think no matter how you put two batteries in, it ends up putting them in series. If you have one battery, um, it limits it to 80 watts, and that's because you've got a lower voltage. It's just harder to make high power level. And also, you, you don't want to fire a single battery at 80 watt, more than 80 watts. You don't want to fire at 200 with two batteries, which is kind of interesting though. One battery at 80, but two batteries you go to 200, not 160, not double. Hmm. I guess 200 makes for a better marketing number, but I'll take a look at voltage drops and things like that when I do the testing. Other features were lots of protections in the thing, 2 amp USB-C charging. I didn't take a look at how well it fit in the slot. Hopefully that's not too bad. And temperature control, which Vaping MacGyver and Physic over at ECR subreddit are testing out. And I don't know if they posted the results yet. Now, my question to chat was, does this non-polarity or unpolarized battery slots, is that something that you like, that you think is really cool or a great feature? And are you willing to pay more for it? Because you saw, I mean, there's 14 big honking MOSFETs there, where normally a device might have two, three, maybe four of those big MOSFETs just used for guiding current around, reverse voltage protection, stuff like that. Would you pay more for it? And is this a feature you'd like to see on more devices? And with that, I get some water. Justin can't wait to see DJ LSB Vapes test on that for the power charts. Redclaw Inshan asks if will it be safe to potentially generate more heat if they charge internally. Well, it's interesting with a big fat circuit board. I mean, let's assume good charging circuits. When you have a huge fat circuit board, that it's easy to draw away the heat. You can make an argument that it, this thing will be, quote, safer than a lot of other devices that have tiny circuit boards just because it's easier to spread out the heat from charging. Because no matter what, 2 amp charging, you're probably about 1.5 watts of heat. Let's see, points between 1 and 2 watts of heat that you got rid of. Doesn't sound like a lot, but in a little tiny space in a sealed box, that can really start heating things up, especially when all the heat is in one chip. So I'm thinking it almost might be better, assuming they do a good job, a little more reliability. I can't say safe or unsafe, but a little more reliability because it'll run at a cooler temperature uh, with that big a circuit board there. But it's all up to the individual design. You can have a little tiny box run cool and be spectacularly reliable, and a big fat honking box be a terrible, crappy design where all the heat never gets to spread out of a tiny spot. There's my figure here. More components, more chances for failure. Statistically, it's not actually true. Um, it's maybe more chance of one type of failure, but can be much lower chances of other types of failures. So you have to look at what types of failures you're talking about. Fewer components can be more heat, which means greater susceptibility to overheating or thermal fatigue, heating, cooling cycles, fracturing bonds and all kinds of popping solder, et cetera, and so forth. So it you have to talk about which types of failures, and the overall reliability or mean time between failure depends on a lot of things other than just the number of components. Fog Dog, it's cool and innovative. Kudos for that, but I personally wouldn't pay extra for it. Okay, thank you. To over yonder, no, don't want the added heat, complexity, loss of capacity, or higher price. Okay. Red Claw Enshan says, nope, for me, not necessary. I'd rather spend some seconds checking polarity than spending more money on a device with more potential sources for errors. Okay. Yeah, it may be the kind of thing where it's just for vapors just moving up from, an internal battery device to their first external battery device. And here's one that takes away a lot of the concerns they have. well, a new vapor wouldn't probably get a parallel device, but parallel devices, it's spectacularly bad design concept because you put in one battery reverse and the batteries short circuit together unless it's got a lot of extra protection, which very few do. But new vapors aren't getting those kind of devices typically, but that's just a terrible way to design a device. Billy and Silo, I think it's pretty cool that a company has done it, but if more companies would clearly mark the battery directions, I don't think it'd be necessary for it. And that's a good point. If you had a big half-inch white plus and white minus, assuming the new vapors know what a plus and minus is, you'd be surprised. Um, that's a really good point to bring up. If it wasn't just little tiny 3/16 of an inch typical all black kind of polarity indicators, maybe worth it. Oh, for anyone with a question or a response, battery space Mooch. If you put that there, it's tagged clearly for me. You don't need a hashtag. You don't need an ad symbol, just battery space Mooch. ACC 1079 wouldn't mind having to pay a small amount extra if it meant an easier time and less chance for problems for newer vapors. John Beninati, I don't think it will be that much of a big deal. It's cool, but I just don't think it's going to make that big of a splash. And that's a whole nother question. What will people think? Will it be received well in the market? If it was 25 cents extra, all the manufacturers would do it, and we just have all around more convenient things to use, assuming it was good performance. But if it adds $5 or probably a lot more, if it adds $10 to the cost of a device, because it might be $2 in components, so they're going to, by the time you get through with assembly and markups of everything, it might be $10 more to the retail price. Uh, then does it become worthwhile, or is it a niche product for new vapors who hear about it? Also, and if you don't have great eyesight and you're just not remembering, um, bang, there we go. It's something great, no matter how long you've been vaping. Sometimes it's better for all the experts to take a small hit to ensure newer, inexperienced vapors have a safer experience. There you go, ACC 1079. There's my figure here. White paint is cheaper. Greasy. Good evening. James Mancuso says, my concern is someone getting used to it and then use a mod without it causing errors. There we go. That's certainly something, especially if let's say they go up to a dual parallel device and no one bothers to tell them. One of them goes in reversed and you short circuit the batteries and one of them can explode. Scott Bogfoot, strange question. Do you think it's possible to make a battery less mod by using a quartz crystal striker and capacitors? Well, I ran some of the numbers for ultra capacitors and using two thumb-size ultra capacitors with their own balancing board, et cetera, and so forth. And you could get about 1 to 2 second hit at 20 amps. So 2 second pulse puff at the most at 20 amps. About equivalent of 60 or 70 watts, and then they're empty, essentially empty. And now you've got to recharge them back up. Now, I don't know what you want to use the quartz crystal striker for, but those are striker. I don't, Scott, Oxford, I don't know what the quartz crystal striker is for. Let me know. But for ultra capacitors, you could, but it'd be the kind of thing where maybe it's a desktop unit. You've got ultra capacitors in the handheld. You got a cable running back to a huge power supply on your desktop, and you just charging up the ultra capacitors in the handheld cabled mod that you take a puff from, that you're not chain vaping like crazy from. Cholo Ranch uses white nail polish to highlight the plus mark. There we go. That's a good idea. Fog Dog. Oh, it's talking to Brent Hughes. Red Claw Inshad. A new vapor resistant to info given trying a stacked mech with point 0.1 build. I call that natural selection then. Sorry, if I want to do something, I need to get at least the basics. Wait, a new vapor resistant to information being given, trying a stacked mech with point 0.1 build, call that natural selection. That's a pretty dangerous build. Yeah, that's well, 0.05. It's equivalent of in terms of current, to 0.05 on a single battery. So that can be an issue, especially if they're not picking the right battery. Sorry, if he wants to do something, needs to get at least the basics in terms of um, that you're proactive about learning and finding out about the products you use, which is good if that's what you're talking about. And we want everyone to do that, but a lot of people don't know. You don't know to go look for more information if you don't know there is more information. If you don't know there are hazards, you're not going to be thinking, I should look for hazards. A lot of people just aren't going to be doing that. They just want to get to the vape or something like that, just want to use the device. No one told me about anything being hazardous, so it's not even going to occur to them that something might be hazardous. They don't blow up anything with their double A's. They never had to worry about their TV remote or anything they've ever used that uses AA batteries. So why would the slightly larger battery be something so dangerous? It's not an automatically intuitive thing that there's a lot of power in these batteries, which is obvious by the number of people who get into accidents. And it's thousands. Don't think just because you see 10 incident reports a year, that's it. It's thousands of people a year, just in America alone, who end up in the emergency room because of battery issues. Squall 88 UK01. I've always found subjectively that a series mod seems to fire faster. Well, for a mech, yes, because if you double the voltage but have not quadrupled the resistance, then you're running at a much higher power level. If you double the voltage, you need to quadruple the resistance to have the same power level when going from a one battery mech to series mech. Now, in a regulated device, series and parallel should not matter, except that you get a little more efficiency, excuse me, with a series regulated device. So they may have just designed it better. It's less expensive components, so they can afford to be more efficient in the design for the same amount of money, and that may do it. Also, it can also be the thing where there's just some badly designed parallel regulated mods that just are exaggerating their specifications or their ratings, and it just can't do the power level you're saying. And also, you've got a narrower voltage window and parallel regulated mod. If the batteries drop below, they're going to start throttling down their power levels. So series mod has a wider voltage range it can use. So for a longer amount of time, the series mod can give you the wattage you're requesting. So I guess there are a lot of things mixed in there. Michael Tahan, 18350 batteries may be making a comeback. A couple ceramic heating dry herb vaporizers that came out recently use them. I bought one this week. That vaporized rolling's back on. Yeah, at least for me, 18650s, 18350s made a comeback last year. There were a lot of 18350 mechs, um, some other things popping around for other communities, like you're saying. So I think they're here. Too bad there's only one 18350 that's any decent, from Youngevity New Energy Company and the companies that rewrap them, Keep Power and VapCell. But at least we have one. That's good. Not like years ago where it's just like people argue, you know, not argue, say that AW had a good 18350. I don't know. I never found one, a genuine one um, that I could test that hadn't been around for years. So over yonder, I would like to see all manufacturers put a big tactile negative on the mods, maybe even glow in the dark. There we go. Well, glow in the dark, you'd have to find a way to recharge it because the box is always closed. An LED behind it. There you go. It gets expensive then because don't want the LED on all the time. You'd open up the box. You'd want it to be able to detect that and put a small LED behind the plus or minus. But I think just that white paint in there, or even no, you don't want to cut out to have something showing through like the silver of a circuit board or something. Joey asks, which battery type would I use for solar power? It depends on your budget. For me, I would just spend the money and use new cells, and I'd probably use lithium ferrous phosphate (LFP). Fairly safe technology. There's some big, huge 40 ampere hour, 100 ampere hour cells in that chemistry. I'd probably use big prismatic cells, rectangular ones. I wouldn't go through the trouble of putting together thousands of 18650s or something like that. If I was going off solar power, I wouldn't be trying to do it for the lowest amount of money possible. I'd be trying to do it for the highest efficiency, um, good safety, et cetera, and so forth. But it all depends on your budget, the amount of space you have, how much time you're willing to put into it, your risk versus reward thresholds. The DIY Powerwall community, they'll they'll spend a year, 2 years getting together thousands of free or almost free 18650s, and then spend hundreds of hours turning them into packs and stuff like that because they don't want to buy new cells. They have time. They don't want to spend the money. So that's their trade-off. Uh, and then, switching out cells as they die and stuff like that. But that's all part of what they want to do. They don't want to spend all that money on new packs and stuff. So they'll spend the time as a trade-off to use used cells from laptop battery packs and other devices, modems, modem batteries, and things like that, and salvage those cells. Scott Bugfoot. Okay, the Quartz Crystal Striker for piezoelectric charging system for the capacitors and the batteryless mod. Oh, okay, that's microamps. So, probably in a few months, you'd have the capacitors charged, then you can take a puff, and then a few months later, you could take a puff. You would have to have either batteries refilling the capacitors slowly. Let's say the batteries fill the capacitor up, in 30 seconds or something like that, so the batteries aren't stressed, and then the capacitors can dump everything in 2 seconds. Or you would use the capacitors on a cable running to a desktop power supply and use that to refill the capacitors fairly quickly. All depends on how thick a cable you want. Mitch asks, my thoughts on conductive grease on the mech button. Well, why do you want to use conductive grease? Do you want to prevent oxidation in the points that aren't touching? Then you can use a conductive grease. If you're trying to use conductive grease to increase the conductivity, just remember that conductive grease is a much worse conductor than metal. So the object is always to have metal touching. The grease just can help to maybe fill in some spots um, on, otherwise in between the high points. If you've got a bunch of high points touching, the grease can fill in these other points and maybe help a little bit of conductivity. But, as soon as hopefully ideally, let's say you cover everything in grease, a thin film of grease. As soon as they touch, you're squeezing out the grease and the metal's touching. I hope to do some tests on that, but the problem is it's useful only in such specific circumstances, which is what it's invented for. Things like sliding contacts. Okay, that could be a little bit better for grease. If you want to prevent oxidation in other parts because you want it to be easier to clean, that's okay. You can use grease there. Just don't blob it on. I'd say try it out. Whichever one you think works better, with or without grease, that's the one to use. I think it's more of a maintenance issue, preventing oxidation and things like that in contacts that don't touch in a long time. If you can keep the grease there, then that can help with conductivity. But for things like mechs, which are used all the time, cleaned all the time, do you want to go through the extra trouble of cleaning off the grease and then re-greasing for what I think would be a limited benefit? It definitely can't be anything fundamental. No, you just look at the science and look at the numbers, conductivity, and et cetera, what's actually happening when contacts touch. It can't do anything fundamental. It's like, silver versus copper. Silver is only 10% more conductive. And that's, for the metal. It's up to the threads and everything else. It's not up to that metal choice. Justin Vickers says the AW18350 were only good for about 6 amps. Okay, so a typical 18350. Good for flashlights, but that's about it. Everyone was, compared to a lot of the other really crappy 18350s, I think everyone back then, 2016, 2015 or something, the AWs were the best choice. Michael, yeah, the VapCell 1100 milliamp hour, 9 amp 18350. Yeah, that's the Young DeLee New Energy Company cell. Same thing with the key power. Around 1000 milliamp hour. There's a lot of variability in 18350s. They're not consistent from cell to cell at all compared to, like a Samsung 18650 or something. Greasy saw a warning on potentially dangerous VTC6A batteries on Fogstar's website earlier. They must be rewraps harvested from old laptops, or they could be fakes. I guess are you talking about the 18650 ones or the 21700s? I have to check that. Red Claw Inshon, What about the grease inside the switch of the Torn Max? If it does not help, it's okay to remove because it's a pain to clean otherwise. Well, I have Torn Max here that's on the in the queue for this week, I hope. Um, I mean, they've got a ball in a clutch plate type arrangement. The ball, let's see what will happen. The clutch plate comes up against the ball, and so you're pushing up. So and there's a little bit of a nesting point for the ball to drop into, contact and touch, and they have grease there. As soon as you start pressing together, the grease should be squeezed out. Now, what the rest of the grease does, I don't know. It looks like they were what, silver or silver plated contacts. So the grease itself isn't going to help much with oxidation because silver just isn't going to be oxidizing like crazy. Um, so I don't know what it does or doesn't do, but I think I remember seeing Grim Greens taking it apart and not seeing grease, but the ones that are shipping now do have grease in them. So they may have seen a performance increase, but I'll be comparing the performance. I've got the new an unused Torn Max here, so I'll try it with the grease, and then I'll clean off the contacts and try it without the grease and see what the difference is. And since I get no arcing because I close the contacts and then I fire the current, I let the current pass through the contacts so there can be no arcing during my testing, I'll be able to test without any change in the contact. So we'll find out, hopefully within a week. Scott Bogfoot asks, are they finished building that world's slimmest skyscraper at the south end of Central Park? That freaking monstrosity, that whole south end of Central Park. It's changed. All these little needle skyscrapers popping up because of the great views looking out over Central Park. I don't know if they're done yet. I haven't been down there. I mean, it's not far away from me, 2.5 miles. But I haven't seen it. They may be done with the building, with the framework, but I'm not sure if they're done cladding it or if they've done the plumbing and electric, that kind of internal stuff yet. So many things were affected when they shut down construction for the pandemic. I don't know what they lost or what they've done. I haven't been down there since um, winter, for that neighborhood. Because soon after that, everything was, people were just like, whoa, no travel. Greasy on their Facebook page. You're talking about, the Fogstar VT6As. Thank you. Michael Hunt says it's already off the market. Don't know what's off the market. Sounds like is this European nicotine stuff? Is anybody actually buying the Maxes? I never asked that. The Freemax Max is 200 for the tank and the coils and stuff. And maybe for, just because they like the look of the kind of almost like a pop art panel on one side. The panel that comes off, the open up is almost like pop art, and the other side is kind of a textured matte, different textures and stuff. Recall Enchon, maybe the grease in the Max's switch is Torn Max is just to make the sliding from the clutch easier. No clue. We'll wait for your tasting. Could be for my tasting. My tasting. Ha! I must be hungry. Um, that could be. Very little movement. Only a few thousandths of an inch for the clutch plates, but that's all you need to move. Just to nestle and settle with the ball. Michael Hunt says Ontario, Canada only sells tobacco menthol flavors now, limited to 20 milligram Nick Max. Okay, that's the guys we're talking about. Justin Vickers is buying the Freemax M Pro 2, and I'm getting them all confused when I'm thinking in my mind because I was going through the website. Unless I watch the reviews and I'm watching fewer and fewer of them because I've been so busy, it all just blurs together unless something I'm interested in buying or something like this with the Max, excuse me, not Max Load technology. What was the technology called again? Oh, good grief, I didn't write it down. The something load technology. Anyway, with the non-polarized battery inputs. So it doesn't look like anyone at least here in chat, is going to be buying. Oh, ACC 1079 may buy the single 21 versus 700 of it, 100 watt. I think it was $55 for the mod only for the dual version. So what would that, if that's $55, I don't know what it would be, 45, $40 maybe for the single version. The M Pro 2 is the tank with the Maxus dual battery kit. Ah, okay. And the single comes with the Firelink. I remember hearing about the Firelink 3 and its coils. Um, Thanks, Justin. So the M Pro 2 is the tank for the dual. Interesting. Two different tanks, but you have the higher power levels for the dual one. Smart load. Thank you. Colors are changing. It's so obvious. That's why I forgot it, I guess. Yeah, they have dual initial caps, one word, smart load they use, for them. And they mentioned, who knows, they do mention patent pending. That'd be interesting to see. I'll have to see whether I forgot to ask them. I didn't see it on the website, a patent number, but at least for US patent number, be able to get it, but it may be China patent or something like that. But it's rare that they will do a patent because for anything in the vaping community, because the product cycles are so short, coming out with development so quickly, things become, quote, obsolete or unwanted so quickly. Why spend all the money for a patent? Perhaps if you're going to have all your devices have that, but the patent is really kind of an instruction manual for someone with less than reputable intentions. It's an instruction manual for them to learn how to copy or design. Um, so there's always a mixed bag when you get a patent. Now, if if you're going to aggressively protect your patent, then it's totally worth it. If you've got the hundreds of thousands of dollars and you want to stomp other companies who copy design, but you have to be able to enforce it. And if you're a China company in China, then you probably can. But like an American company trying to sue a China company, that's for me a losing bet. So wouldn't it be worth it for the American company for me to issue a patent because you can't protect it. You can't protect your intellectual property from being copied, let's say in China, because you can't prosecute in China, and you're just handing them a ton of information by having that patent. Mitch asked if I'm going to test the heavy hitter. I'm supposed to be being, I'm supposed to be getting a heavy hitter, but I don't know when. I hear they're going to ship probably, I think, within a week. At least that was the news 2 weeks ago, but I don't know when I'll be getting it. If I do it, certainly be testing it. Tova Yonder, isn't China patent an oxymoron? No, not at all. Actually, you can do some, for China companies, with IP registration and protection in China. There are things they can do in China. It's for companies outside China trying to prevent companies in China from doing anything just because it's so hard for an outside company to prosecute a China company in the China courts. Senior Loki is saying Heavy is waiting for the final boxes, okay, of the heavy hitter mech. Yeah, that I'm anxious to test. And I'll probably fire it up, but they wanted me to really torture it. I'm not going to put it on that 300 thing that Heavy and I were talking about. That'll melt it. 300 amps is 100 times the heat than 30 amps. Yeah, 100 times the heat is created inside the mech than 30 amps, and no atomizer is going to survive it anyway. But I'll probably give it 50 amps. I'll be able to put that on video. Forrest says, I know it's off the wall, but foregoing the impracticality, if there were a mod that was wired to plug into a battery pack, describe if there was a mod that was wired to plug in the battery pack. Sounds like the Anakin disruptor. You slide a battery pack onto it. Are you saying, you've got a battery, like you know, a backpack battery pack or a desktop battery pack? Um, what is an ideal battery pack? Oh, there's no ideal. It's, are you carrying it in a backpack? Does it have to slide onto the device? What kind of power levels are you talking about? How long do you want to go before you recharge it? You could have, a 5-pound battery pack on your back and do chain vape 200 watts all day long. If it's something you want to slide on, that's, you know, you want, no bigger than one or two 21/700s, well, then you're severely limited. Give me more information for us. Ideal battery pack is I guess conceptually it's just one that protects the batteries. Short circuit protection, overcharge, etc. protection. Maybe it's got some nice contacts that just drop into a charger, or high reliability connectors for you use the cable for ultra fast charging. Gets rid of its heat. Well, doesn't if one battery goes in the thermal runaway, it doesn't take all the other batteries with it. Has a terrific battery management system that's absolutely critical if you've got a bunch of batteries in there. Let's say it's a big battery pack because you're going on a 5-day camping trip and you just want to run a cable up to your mod and vape with it. So I have a lot of questions for you for us as to what your scenario is. Loki says, kill it. Like he said, he'll send you another. I don't remember him saying that. That's why I'm thinking I don't want to kill it. I want to give it away to I want to have one of my patrons own it after I'm done testing it. Senor Loki says, sounds like a lipo on a cord. That could be what Forrest is talking about. Forrest, let me know what your a little more what the pack is. And we still got a good 10 minutes here. I'm hoping that the Maxis goes on sale soon. I sent a couple of messages to FreeMax asking him, because I see it for sale on the site, but are they shipping it if I buy it off this site? Because Element Vape and I think another place don't have it yet. I don't want to place an order at FreeMax's website. It takes a month to get it, and then Element Vape gets it next week, but it takes a month for FreeMax to ship or something like that. Uh, so hopefully I'll find out a little more when it's shipping because I'm anxious to peel it open, get a better look, and find out, what's the power loss? How much are we losing by having this terrific smart load, non-polarized battery inputs? Red Claw Idshon, I got a MechLife Arcless V2. Oh, excellent. V2 coming in this week. They say it's made from copper. Sure, looked like copper in the review I saw. Do I think it'll hit harder than the regular one? What was the other one? Brass? Um, I've forgotten already. Uh, The copper will hit a little bit harder than brass. The metal itself, folks, just the metal itself could hit slightly harder, maybe not noticeably harder. What it's going to be is how is it machined? How well do the threads, what's the surface smoothness of the threads? How well do they lock up, smear and press against each other? What's the surface profile of the contacts, because contacts, yes, it's constant contact with the battery, but inside the button, it's a regular set of contacts hitting. Well, what's the voltage drop in there? Being copper or brass something, that's not going to change. I bet you that's still a copper contact. So it should hit. It should hit harder. Whether you'll notice it, I don't know, and it all depends on the threads. Maybe they've done a better job to the threads, and it could hit 2 watts better instead of a third of a watt better. I'm anxious to hear, in chat what your experience is. Over yonder, just says my name, Scott Bogfoot. If you don't mind me asking, what are the photos behind you? Are the ones you've taken yourself? Oh, these are actually those are postcards from travel. And here, um, some of them are most of them, actually, the ones that you can see, oh, actually, it looks like there's one peeling off the wall. That's the heat. Uh, they are old, not turn of the century, 1920s, 1930s postcards, copying posters, advertising posters in the 1920s and 30s for cars, boat travel across the seas, bicycles and things like that. Just neat 1920s and 1930s posters that they turned into postcards that I'd gotten on a trip to Switzerland and just grabbed. Let's see, like this stack in here. Top one is Zeppelin poster for a Zeppelin trip, and then there's some other ones in that stack. So most of them are European 1920s, 1930s posters that I found on postcards. Red Claw Injon says, true, threading is vital. Applies my threads on the V1, and I think it hits harder now. Could just be voodoo, though. Yeah, I mean, the threads, I don't think people realize is how much cleaning threads need. Or if you don't have them smearing, something you can do is let your threads oxidize to a point where they're noticeably darker, or go ahead and artificially oxidize them, and then tighten your mod and loosen it, tighten, loosen it a couple times, and see where you can see clean metal. And that's the only point your mech threads are touching, where you see clean metal. If you don't see any clean metal, then your threads aren't really smearing against each other and breaking the oxides layer. Then it's just kind of they're just kind of touching at another point in the mech. Florida Vape said the OG brass arcless was a beast. The button tightened super tight. Okay. Yeah, I think I remember doing okay in testing. Forrest, okay, for that ideal battery pack, tabletop battery that would work, 100-watt mod and last a week. What kind of battery? Well, if I had tabletop, I wouldn't use batteries. I would just use a power supply, an adjustable power supply, straight with power cord up to the mech, excuse me, up to the mod. But if you don't want to use a power supply, if you want to use a battery, what would I use? Depending on the budget. I guess I'd use 21700s. Um, Molicel P42As. Connecting to them is the problem. So actually, maybe I would use big LFP, lithium ferrous phosphate, like 40 ampere hour cells, because they have bolt-on terminals, screw terminals for a lot of those. Problem is, you have to buy them from China, and you never know what quality cells you're going to be getting. But it's really easy to put them in parallel and series with bus bars to make any size you want. Or I would use lipos, because I know I can solder. It's difficult, but you can solder to the tabs, the floppy tabs on the lipos. And I would make a big lipo pack, and I would just make sure they ran cool. Had if I had them in series, I'd have a little battery management system or something in there. Last a week. For a tabletop, though, you've got power, don't you? Um, so you'd be able to, they wouldn't have to last a week. Um, But if you don't want to hook them up to any kind of power, don't want to recharge for a week, then I'd say, big lithium. LiPo is a big lithium ferrous phosphate. I, I I don't know what I would do. I'd have to give a lot of thought, because for me in my mind, I can't get past the point of you've got a tabletop unit, but you don't want to use power from the wall to run, just to run a power supply straight up to the mod. You want to use batteries. And even though recharging power is right there because it's a tabletop unit, you don't want to recharge them for a week. So I can't get past that in my mind. My apologies, to figure out what kind of cells that I'd want to use, because I would just use a power supply and dial the voltage to what I needed. Greasy uses Brasso on the mech threads. There we go. Yeah, anything liquid that you can get in there. I use Never Dull, the cotton, and because I like that it dissolves the oxidation as opposed to having to, well, I guess the Brasso dissolves it too, and then mechanically moves it. Florida Vapes puts 3-in-1 oil on the threads, spin the button in and out, cleans up real good. Okay. That could work if the threads engage hard and you're squeezing the oil out, 'cause otherwise the oil is completely insulating and reducing your conductivity. I'd say use 3-in-1 oil, but then use a toothbrush and soap to get all the oil off after you clean them. For us, use a sealed lead acid battery for the application. 40 ampere hours, can handle 100 watts easily. There you go, Michael. That's actually an interesting idea. Yeah, you can always just go to lead acid, and then just get a lead acid charger, which would plug into the power that you had right there all along. See, that's the point I can't get past. Yeah, it's 12 volt. Michael Don says it's 12 volt output from the battery, so you have to use a voltage regulator, and it's got to be rated, you know, 100 watts. You're probably talking, up to 30 amps or something that regulator has to be able to handle. Couple more minutes here. Scott Bogfoot, obviously nothing is safe, but would you consider vaping while charging safe? It's all up to the device. There's nothing inherent in That's wrong because you're taking current out of one side while you're putting in, power on the other side, charging slowly at 1 amp while you're drawing bursts of 30 amps. Nothing inherent wrong with that, as long as the circuitry for that particular mod is designed well. Thank you, great show. Thank you for your kind words. Cheers, Scott. Over yonder, can a regular multimeter read the output of a mod correctly? Yeah, yeah, just put it right on the posts. Fire the mod. You'll read the voltage to the coils right there. And even a $5 multimeter can read, typically, it's pretty accurate on reading the voltage. And another vape show decided to go very early today. Why did they do that to me? They had no respect whatsoever. They can't even wait till they're 8 o'clock. We'll do another couple of questions and we'll call it an evening. Forrest, thanks. That's what I was wondering. Along with the power supply option, have a great week. Thank you. Sir, the same to you. Also, Ulight asked, does anyone in this community care about lithium batteries containing cobalt and how cobalt is mined? No good way around it, even if you know. It's hard. Just about every single, the only chemistry, I don't think, I bet you everyone's going to care about it, but are they willing to give up using those batteries for it? That's the big thing because you have to use the lithium ferrous phosphate cells then at low voltage, lower end. You have 1100 milliamp per hour, 18650s. That's it. 2600 milliamp per hour, 26650s. So the whole cobalt, it's a nightmare. It's a disaster. But the alternatives are, just big, huge, inefficient mods. Until they come up with alternate battery technologies, it'll be several years. So hopefully that comes better. And we'll make Stewart's the last one. Not a question. Cheers and chat. Catch you all next time. And we'll call that an evening. Red Baron reviews. Anywhere in Gleesy coming up with a new video? Yes, the recall still exists. Recalls don't get recalled. So, but Gleesy has said nothing. But I'll have a video coming up on that. It's just been fried, crazy busy. So everyone, oh, my apologies. Don Bettinati, $3 super chat. Thank you very much. Thanks for all your testing you do for the industry. Thank you. For that will go into it. Have I missed anyone else? No. Just John, thank you. Everyone, thank you for coming by. Head on over to another vape show. Always lots of great topics. Um, See, this is when I usually get off because I usually don't start till now. And thank you for joining us tonight. I hope everyone stays safe and stays sane. Good night.